Oh, that you would tear the heavens open. Come down. The mountains shall shake before you, as when fire burns twigs, as fire makes water boil, to make your name known to your adversaries. So the nations tremble before you. When you did fearfully, which we did not expect, you came down. Mountains shook before you.
The scientists foresee a disaster sparked by violent volcanic activity. Vents along the ridge, spewing plumes of ash that darken the skies. Lava pouring into a boiling sea. Hellish fires consuming forests. Earthquakes shaking the island, reducing towns and villages to rubble. Followed by the final fracture of a massive shard of 500 cubic kilometers of rock, plunging into the sea, sparking a mountainous wave almost a kilometer high. Northern Africa would be hit within an hour, then Southern Europe. The Caribbean islands and the entire eastern seaboards of North and South America would be doomed.
The mountains flowed at the presence of Yahweh. This Sinai, at the presence of Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel.
Cumbre Vieja is saturated with water, capped by thick layers of ash and rock. Lava sheets, or dikes, trap the water from the side like a rocky seal. If this water becomes heated, it could spark a catastrophe.
These dikes within the volcano are trapping water between them. Then another eruption occurs, more magma is coming up through. The magma in the new dike is very hot, 2000 Fahrenheit. So it heats the water. If the water was able to escape, it would just flash to steam. But of course it's trapped between the dikes. So it's like the water is in a pressure cooker. You heat the water, the pressure goes up. And it's that extra pressure pushing on the rocks to either side that we think is going to be the cause of the flank of the volcano eventually collapsing in some future eruption.
Very porous material, there's lots of water in there, and so when the dike comes in, heats it up, there's a big pressurization.
Pressurized water could be the catalyst for the landslip that creates a mega tsunami. And La Palma's ancient Cumbre Vieja volcano may be already on the move. La Palma is an open, sprawling record of dramatic geological change. Jagged peaks and giant holes have been blown into existence by extreme volcanic violence. Could this speck of rock in the Atlantic really cause global devastation? Those who are convinced that it's just a matter of time say it's part of a process that began long ago. La Palma was once dominated by another volcano, Cumbre Nueva. It erupted more than 500,000 years ago, changing the face of the island. After the collapse, a series of vents emerged, creating 3 rift zones. As lava was injected into them, the rift zones swelled into the Cumbre Vieja. Critically, the western flank formed over rubble, the remains of the ancient Cumbre Nueva volcano. It makes the western flank inherently unstable. Over time, the series of vents on either side of the volcano have become inactive. apart from one simmering strip running north-south along the ridgeline. It's the only outlet for a future eruption, and that could tear the island apart. It's an ominous pattern that can be seen time and again in the geological record, a pattern that precedes an eruption and collapse. Evidence in the field points to a threat. In a future eruption, Cumbre Vieja could fail catastrophically, sending the western flank plunging into the sea. Earthquake-generated events, like Sumatra in 2004, typically produce a series of separate waves spanning great distances. These long wavelength events can travel thousands of kilometers and still conserve their destructive energy. But a volcanic landslip, like the one predicted to occur off La Palma, will produce short wavelengths. It's thought that these waves will spread out and lose their destructive power as they cross the Atlantic. The doomsday scenario raises a profound question. What, if anything, can we do in the face of a La Palma-like catastrophe? If eruptions and earthquakes did start to hit La Palma, like they did in 1949, officials half a world away in New York would face an almost impossible conundrum. If and when to issue an emergency evacuation alert. People living in low-lying areas like Brooklyn, Queens, and Lower Manhattan would be the most vulnerable to killer waves. Getting all residents to safety could take up to 18 hours. If officials waited until the tsunami was triggered, the evacuation call could come too late. The wave could rocket across the Atlantic in just 9 hours. But a false alarm would cause billions of dollars worth of disruption to businesses and lives.
And you came near, and stood at the foot of the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire, to the heart of the heavens, darkness, cloud, and thick gloom. Deuteronomy 4:11.
The experts convinced that Cumbre Vieja will erupt, fragment, and collapse are calling for greater monitoring of the active vents that line the far spine of this volcanic outcrop in the Atlantic. They say there's no need for panic, but also no room for complacency.
The key question, of course, is when is this collapse going to happen? When is this giant tsunami that we're predicting going to strike all around the North Atlantic? And we just don't know the answer to that. There's going to be a real need to closely monitor the volcano during its future eruptions.
So the current status. Where are we now? Well, let's take a look.
Ongoing volcanic eruption on one of Spain's Canary Islands could simply be a warning sign of far worse to come. Here's what you need to know. As the La Palma volcano shows no sign of stopping its eruption, there is a possibility it could cause a mega tsunami, according to a 2001 study in the Geophysical Research Letters Journal. The study outlined how cracks below the surface of the volcano, exacerbated by an eruption, could cause between 150 to 500 cubic kilometers of rock to slide into the ocean at 100 meters per second. The New Zealand Herald outlines how the huge force that landslide generated could create massive waves up to 900 meters high that could eventually hit the coast of the Americas at heights of up to 25 meters, with a tsunami reaching Florida around 9 hours after the initial collapse. Subsequent studies have played down the risk of this kind of disaster occurring for a number of reasons, informed by new models created after the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami. It has been argued that any collapse of the ridge would not occur with the force described in the original study, with one explanation for that being that it is likely any collapse would happen in stages. Most do, however, agree that any collapse would prove devastating for the Canary Islands around La Palma at the very least. And either way, it fits neatly within the sentiment from a separate, more recent study, which published in the Nature Communications journal, says that massive volcanic supereruptions really shouldn't be the focus of our attention, because it's much more likely that smaller eruptions will destroy us all first. The point is about being realistic. Researchers say that while eruptions from supervolcanoes happen at intervals of hundreds of thousands of years, lower magnitude eruptions, rated between 3 and 6 on the Volcanic Explosivity Index, occur far more regularly and still have the potential to cause mass disruption if they occur in one of 7 key pinch points. Citing the infamous 2010 eruption in Iceland, which grounded flights across Europe and lost the global economy $5 billion, the research points out that a significant portion of critical infrastructure is located near lower magnitude volcanic centers. Near those centers, ash clouds, volcanic gases, landslides, mud flows, earthquakes, and tsunamis could cause massive disruption by snapping undersea cables, destroying crops, damaging power plants, electric grids and pipelines, and blocking maritime passages. In a future scenario where these lower magnitude eruptions interact with key societal vulnerabilities, they could cascade us toward catastrophe if international communications networks, global supply chains, and financial systems were disrupted. In some regions, an eruption could even result in civil unrest and see governments fall. The 7 pinch points listed in the report are the northwestern United States, Taiwan, the Chinese-North Korean border, the Luzon Strait, the Strait of Malacca, the Mediterranean, and the North Atlantic. In one compelling case study, it says that an eruption in the northwest United States involving either Mount Rainier, Glacier Peak, or Mount Baker, which would rank at around 6 on the Volcanic Explosivity Index, would likely cause mud flows and ash clouds near Seattle. The result of those would be that activity at airports and seaports nearby, which constitute 2.5% of the U.S.'s total traffic, would be forced to stop. From there, estimated losses would reach $7.63 billion of global GDP over a 5-year period, according to the study. Other nightmare scenarios conjured by the study include devastation to tech industries near Taipei, where much of the world's computer chip manufacturing is based, or damage to undersea cables in the Mediterranean. It also focuses on restricted shipping access through the Suez Canal, the Indonesian archipelago, and the Luzon Strait, plus disruptions to aerial traffic between London and New York. The authors of the study emphasize that their point is not to scare people. Rather, it is to say we should work towards reducing the fragility of systems to these kinds of events.
A melting Alaskan glacier may set off a landslide and trigger a tsunami in Prince William Sound, according to a public letter by climate scientists and geologists at institutions including the University of Alaska, the Ohio State University, and the University of British Columbia. This event could happen as soon as next year and no later than 20 years from now, they say. The researchers say the Barry Glacier's retreat inland could send its scarp tumbling down the Barry Arm. A complete failure of the scarp will cause a destructive tsunami to crash down Barry Arm and Harriman Fjord, while partially endangering Port Wells. If the scarp fails completely, it would raise waves as high as 1,000 feet, which would threaten fishing boats and the hundreds of fishermen and tourists who frequent the region. Even locations far from the Barry Glacier may experience 30-foot tall waves. According to the letter, climate change is melting Barry Glacier, and the retreating ice has left a swath of the cliff unsupported by its mass. The loose scarp then entered into a slow-motion landslide that is now showing signs of speeding up.
A deadly tsunami struck coastal towns on the islands of Sumatra and Java, Indonesia, on Saturday. The tsunami was caused by an eruption from Anak Krakatau, a volcanic island that sits in the Pacific Ring of Fire in the Sunda Strait. According to Reuters, the eruption caused a 64-hectare portion of the volcano to collapse into the ocean, triggering an underwater landslide that would set off the tsunami. No warning system was triggered at the time of the tsunami. Indonesian officials stated that their tsunami buoy network has not been operational since 2012. According to The Guardian, if a buoy network had been installed around Anak Krakatau, it would have given surrounding towns a maximum of 1 to 2 minute warnings ahead of pending waves. Scientists have a theory about what might have caused the tsunami that followed the earthquake in Indonesia last week to be so destructive. The BBC reports the 7.5 magnitude earthquake struck in the center of the island of Sulawesi. triggering 6-meter tall tsunami waves that crashed into Palu City. The earthquake itself was a strike-slip quake, which means the ground breaks horizontally instead of vertically. Scientists say strike-slip quakes often cause tsunamis that are less than 1 meter tall, not one as tall as the one that hit Indonesia last week. Scientists suspect the earthquake may have triggered an underwater landslide that destabilized sediment underwater, causing it to break free and tumble. Palu's bay's elongated shape also may have amplified the effect of the tsunami. The earthquake and the tsunami have already caused substantial damage in Indonesia, with more than 1,000 people confirmed dead and many more trapped under collapsed infrastructure in Sulawesi.
If you haven't accepted Jesus, Yeshua, God, the Holy Spirit into your life, you need to do it now, because this is clearly a sign that we're getting closer and closer. And you don't want to be not ready for it whenever it comes. It's going to be pretty ugly after we get raptured out of here. So keep your head lifted, keep looking up, and rejoice in the Lord. All right, y'all have a great day. See y'all later.